Celeste is one of my all-time favorite games. I absolutely love it to death, and I think it does just about everything right. Everything from the music to the controls to the level design is just top tier, but one thing I think that Celeste has absolutely mastered is the difficulty curve. During my time in Celeste, from the very first level all the way to the insanity of the seasides, one thing that I noticed is that my overall level of challenge remained consistent. To put it differently, the game got harder at the same rate I was improving, and honestly, I'm not sure I can name a single other game that got it so perfect. Let's see why Celeste just nails it. So to start off, I need to acknowledge how tight the controls are. When playing as Madeline, her movement is precise, consistent, and it just feels good. Furthermore, her dash is an extremely versatile tool, allowing for not just 8-directional movement, but it can be used as a catalyst for a variety of complex maneuvers. This makes it so not only is it fun to play, but you also know that the game itself will never just screw you over. Your deaths are your own fault, and that means that through persistence you can succeed on your own merits. For me personally, that made it much easier to keep moving forward. Now I think the core of what makes Celeste's difficulty curve so smooth is actually its checkpoint system. See, even though it's an incredibly difficult game, Celeste has one of the most forgiving checkpoint systems in any game I've ever played. Every time you transition to a new screen, there's a checkpoint. Generally speaking, the game saves your progress every few obstacles. That means that if there's one particular obstacle that's giving you trouble, you don't have to keep replaying the last dozen obstacles each time you want to make a new attempt. I know that I personally can get pretty tilted when a game makes me waste times on challenges I already know I can beat just so I can get to the part that's actually screwing me up. Additionally, Celeste teaches the player new mechanics as the game goes on. Madeline's dash can interact with the environment in a lot of really neat ways, allowing her to maneuver in ways that seem impossible on the surface. For example, a wall bounce is performed by dashing alongside a wall and jumping off during the dash animation. This propels Madeline upwards much higher than she could normally reach. Or take the wave dash. By dashing diagonally downward and jumping at just the right moment, Madeline will fly forward at high speed while also recharging her dash. These techniques aren't ridiculously complicated, but they do require a good amount of timing, and it's tough to use them practically when you first learn them. Not having to redo a bunch of obstacles while you're still unfamiliar makes this process a lot less frustrating, even though the obstacles themselves, and really the level as a whole, hasn't gotten any easier. Plus, it's not like each obstacle only requires a single input to overcome. Many obstacles require you to chain advanced techniques together or do a variety of precise movements in succession without failing. You still get that sense of, once I start, I'd better not fail, but since it's all contained in a single obstacle, it's far less frustrating than a more traditional checkpoint system, where you have to redo isolated tasks that you already know you can fully complete without issue. There's a sense of cohesion in Celeste that many games simply lack. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about how often Celeste teaches the player new things that build on existing concepts. As I mentioned before, you learn new techniques throughout your entire experience, and I do mean the entire time. For example, let's look at the move commonly known as a hyper. To do a hyper, you dash diagonally downward from a standing position and jump before the animation ends. This propels you forward. This is taught to the player during the Chapter 8 Seaside, which until the release of the free Chapter 9 DLC was the very last level you could possibly do. This was the final challenge, and they were still teaching you new shit. And unlike some other games, every new technique you learn is something you can do right out the gate if you know how, which just feels really cool. You're learning how to use the abilities you already have rather than the game simply unlocking new ones for you. On top of this, every chapter has its own unique environmental mechanics. There's these moving platforms that activate when you touch them. There's this weird bubble thing which basically dashes you in a direction of your choice. There's these bouncy clouds, but the one thing that remains true is that they're all very intuitive. I never once had to stop playing in order to look up how a level's mechanic works. It was always very clear to me after minimal interaction what each thing did. Of course, there are instances where you have to figure out a clever way to use these mechanics, but the baseline functionality is very simple. And from there, most of the actual challenge comes from the execution. Celeste is very good at making the player focus not on what to do, but how to do it. For me personally, I get very tilted when I'm playing a game and I can't figure out how to progress. If I don't know what to do, I get frustrated. Maybe that's why I don't play too many puzzle adventure games. With Celeste, I never once felt like I had no idea what to do. Within a half dozen attempts, I was able to figure out what needed to be done for each obstacle, and it was ultimately just a matter of actually doing it. And consider that, as I mentioned previously, you're constantly engaging with new mechanics, and the game is also giving you new and unique situations to use these mechanics, so the experience never gets stale. There's always something new to grab your attention. Now there is another thing I should probably talk about, which is the overall attitude Celeste has towards the player. Now this doesn't actually affect the difficulty curve directly, but I do believe it has a psychological impact on the player as they progress through the game. Many notoriously difficult games act rather callously and sometimes outright maliciously towards the player. Take Super Meat Boy, another fantastic, extremely difficult platformer. When you die, its attitude is basically, haha, you suck, fuck you. This does fit in with the theme of the game and it gives it a unique charm, but for me personally, I didn't find it particularly motivating. Now in some games, negative reinforcement can absolutely get me to overcome challenges out of spite. Cuphead in particular was great at that. But Cuphead is a game where you fight bosses, and when you finally beat the crap out of them, it feels like you're getting revenge for all the times they laughed at you. In a game like Super Meat Boy, you're not fighting anything. You're trying to get to the end of the level without dying. When it acts all negative, I found that I was directing my frustration inward at myself, which ate away at my motivation to push forward. However, in Cuphead, I was able to project that onto whatever boss kept killing me, making me eager to return the favor. But Celeste is different, very different, and largely that's for narrative reasons rather than gameplay reasons. A lot of Celeste's storytelling is not literal. You've got metaphors and symbolism out the ass. On the surface, Celeste is a game about Madeline climbing a mountain, but deeper down it's about her struggle with anxiety, and the entire journey is really just a metaphor for that. And her evil doppelganger antagonist is just a representation of that anxiety. Celeste's whole message, if I were to grossly oversimplify it, is take a deep breath, compose yourself, and keep moving forward. You can do this. And although I don't personally struggle with anxiety, I do know several people who do, and from what they've told me, that's the exact mindset you need to have when that part of your brain is on overdrive. This message of keep pushing on is something that kept me moving forward as the game got progressively more and more challenging. And while this would be no substitute for good level design and a proper difficulty curve, I found that it complemented Celeste's other strengths exceptionally well. The general feeling I got from the game was that yes, the obstacles in front of me are difficult to overcome, and yes, they're only going to get tougher, but as I went through each one, I grew as a player. My timing became more precise. My dashes were actually getting me where I needed to go. I was correctly executing the various wall bounces, hypers, and wave dashes more consistently. And as I got better, the challenges in front of me reflected that, all the while encouraging me to keep moving forward. I don't think I've ever played a game that has as smooth and consistent a difficulty curve as Celeste. And even those that came close were nowhere near as hard, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I love a good challenge. Celeste is an extremely difficult game. Hell, by the time I got every achievement, I racked up over 12,000 deaths. But it helps you through the process of mastering the game. It guides you throughout your entire experience, not so much by holding your hand, but by giving you a nice push from behind. It definitely feels like the game and its creators are on your side and want you to succeed, but in the end, it's still your skill and your determination that'll get you through the toughest obstacles. When you finally beat that tough level, you'll know that you beat it and that this victory belongs to you. And oh man, at the end of the day, you'll be able to look at that end screen and say to yourself, I fucking did it, and it feels so good. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment and subscribe if you want to see more. I upload every Sunday, so make sure to check back in. Every bit of interaction really does help me and my channel reach more people. Well, with all that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no